a special prayer once everybody gets back once again for all those. We've got a lot of folks not doing well that we need to remember. Tonight we're going to move on to, we've been talking about, of course, what causes people to drift or abandon their faith, and it came down to either trusting in ourselves or living by faith. And what does that actually mean to live by faith? If we're going to live up to God's calling, and His calling is be holy as I'm holy, then I think we need to take some decisive actions, if you will. And sometimes we try to excuse our responsibility of why we don't do that, of why we're not living up to our potential, why we're not living by faith like we should. But there's a path in which we are supposed to take, and that path takes commitment, it takes dedication, it takes willpower. It takes a lot of things to be able to accomplish that. The Scriptures tell us we've got to take some action. In Romans chapter 8, beginning at verse 12, Paul says, "Therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." Now notice again what he says here. "Therefore, brethren, we're debtors, not to the flesh." We're debtors to live according, or not to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you'll die. But he says there's an alternative to this. But if we live by the Spirit, in other words, walking by faith, then we put to death the deeds of the body and we'll live. He also said in Colossians 3 and verse 5, "Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desires, covetousness, which is idolatry." Now both of these passages tell us that we've got to put to death the deeds of the flesh. Now, to put these things to death does not mean that we're not tempted. We're always still going to be tempted. But one thing that we have the power to do, and I think a lot of times we don't exercise that power or we don't think about that power, is that that God's telling us that we need to kill the power and the strength of these works of the flesh that are in our lives. Now, we can't get rid of temptations, we can't get rid of what comes around, but we can kill the power that it has over us. We can kill its strength. And I think a lot of times we don't think of it in terms like that. We just think that, we just gave into it, or well, I just didn't have the ability to overcome that. Well, we do. We don't have the ability to stop the temptation, but we do have the ability to kill the power that it has over us. We're in a battle, and Satan is fighting each and every day, and we're supposed to be walking by faith. If we want to stay true to our faith, that's going to take commitment to do. And it's going to take some action on our part. It's going to take some decisions on our part of what we're supposed to do. So if we want to keep from abandoning our faith, if we want to walk by faith and do the things that we should do, then we've got to resolve in our minds that we're going to do it. That's a choice that we can make. And it is up to us. It's not up to anybody else. A lot of times we want to point the finger, or we don't want to take the blame, or we want to say it's somebody else's fault, or somebody caused me to do this, or this happened in my life, or that happened in my life. And there are a lot of things that happen in our life. The Christian life's not easy. Living in this world is not easy. Satan is battling as much as he can every single day to get us not to walk by faith. So it's not going to be easy. We're fighting him every step of the way. But what we've got to realize is we have within us, this is what God is giving us, that this strength that's through him to overcome the power that he has. He doesn't have the power over us. Now, he can tempt us, But we have the power to overcome that. So we have to kill that power that the works of the flesh have over us. And that's not going to be an easy thing to do. Now, I think tonight we're going to simply go through and consider how we can kill the strength of these sins that may have power over us. The Bible says that we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. But I think sometimes we want to take the attitude of, I just want to make sure I don't sin too much. I definitely don't want to commit the big sins, whatever you think the big sins are in your mind. We definitely don't want to do that. And I think we go into this battle thinking, I just don't want to sin too much. Now, really think about that. And I've talked to people before, and I think I've even said this before in conversations with people when you talk about life struggles. Sometimes we say, the very best we can do is just not sin too much, because we're all going to sin. We resolve in our minds, the Bible says we're going to sin. So I think sometimes we think that's a license to not try as hard as we should try. That we think it's just our shortcomings, we think it's just mistakes, or we just give in every once in a while. Whatever excuse we come up with, we think that I just don't want to sin too much. That's kind of like a soldier going into battle saying, I just don't want to get shot too much. That's my goal. Can you imagine that? I don't want to get shot too much. Satan is firing his darts, his arrows, his things to us everywhere, trying to hit our weakness. We don't want to say, I just don't want him to hit me too much. God has given us the power to cover ourselves where He doesn't penetrate. It doesn't stop us. So we can't go into this battle and say, I just don't want to get hit too much. We need to go into this battle with the mindset of, I don't want to get hit at all. I want to be as strong as I can, as healthy as I can, as motivated as I can, as committed as I can in this battle. That's why he says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, is walking around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. He's not going to give up on us. And God's not giving up on us. But the thing is, we have power over the powers of this world. We can stop the strength. We can kill the strength, the power that it has over us, and that's what we have to do. Well, how do we do that? Well, I think there's some necessary actions or things that we can do in this pursuit of walking by faith. And I think the first and foremost thing, and it seems simple, but it's something that maybe we don't think of, is that obedience is necessary. We've got to be able to determine what is right and what is wrong. So when it comes to obedience, it's very obvious, but we're required to do God's will. And if we don't understand that concept, we're going into battle very incompetent. So how do I win this battle? How do I kill the strength that this world, these fleshly things have over me? By doing the will of God. It's just that simple of understanding what is right, what is wrong, not looking at anybody else and pointing the blame. Nobody else makes me do what I do. Nobody else makes me give in to whatever it is I give in to. Nobody else has caused me to sin. Now, others may provide a stumbling block, just like I may be a stumbling block for other people. They may provide the circumstances around which these temptations come, but there's not a single person out there, including Satan, that can have the power over us and make us do something. It's within our power, so we have to take responsibility. We have to quit making excuses and saying, well, this was too hard, or I was going through this trial too much, or I had too much on me, or I had this. Whatever excuse it is that we come up with that causes us not to go into battle fully equipped, it's time to say, that stops. It's nobody's responsibility except my own. I choose to do this or that. I choose to say this or that. I choose to go here or there. It's my choice. So I can't go into it and say, I'm just not going to do that bad. I can't go in it with that kind of attitude. Again, it's like a soldier going in and say, well, I just hope I don't get shot up too much. I don't know about you, but if I was going into battle, I don't think I'd want to be shot at all. It's like, what is it? Says if you come in contact with a bear that, play dead, it won't eat you too much. I'm not going to play dead. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I don't get eat at all, right? Well, that's what we have to do. We have to face it with that kind of attitude. And I think as Christians sometimes, we're afraid to be bold like that. The Bible tells us many times we come boldly before the throne of God. We can boldly do these things. We can boldly say these things because the power is not in us. The power is through God in us. It's that power of the gospel, Paul says. So if I'm doing His will, then I can understand these things when it comes to what is right and what is wrong. I've got to have a game plan. And here's the thing. I've got to have this game plan. I can't just wait and think, okay, when I get into these situations, I'll just run over here, pick up a Bible, and start reading it. Well, I think reading and studying the Bible will help us through temptation, but it's not going to help us right when we're in the middle of temptation, and we have to make a decision right then. Or am I going to stop and say, okay, temptation, wait just a minute, let me go over here and study for about 20 minutes. No, I need to already have a plan. I need to make sure I'm already equipped. I need to make sure I'm already ready for this. I've had a lot of conversations over the years with individuals before they get married and things of this nature. And it always comes down to the same thing when it comes to dating even. Is you've got to have a plan. If you want to make sure you don't get in situations and do things, make sure you got a plan not to be in those situations. Make sure you got a plan that I'm going to be committed to this. I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to be dedicated so these things don't slip up on me. That I have to make a decision in the moment. Because I can tell you from experience, and I can tell you from talking to individuals that have experienced 99.9999999% of the time, you'll never make the right decision in the moment. Because in the moment, your decision making is the circumstances around you, the emotions that you're feeling, the things that are going on. That's what's driving your decision making. But what should drive our decision making, if we're walking by faith, is I've already decided I'm going to walk by faith. Just like Joshua said, choose this day whom you will serve. We have to make that decision every single day. When we wake up in the morning, we need to say that. I'm going to make a decision today to make sure I'm walking by faith, so that will dictate the things that I say. That will dictate the things that I do. That will dictate the places that I go. If I'm doing God's will, that way I can know what's right and what's wrong. It may sound simple, and really it is. It's so simple that we don't even think about it. But it's a choice. When the Bible says, take up His cross daily and follow after Him, what do we think that means? Why can't I just, when I made the decision to become a Christian, I took up the cross then? Why does He say daily? You ever know?
Because you're making the decision every moment of your life.
Yeah.
If you're going to do right or wrong.
I'm having to die to the flesh daily, because every day I'm having to make these decisions. And if I don't do that, that's just like getting married and saying, well, I told my spouse I loved them when I got married. If I ever change my mind, I'll tell them. And never say anything or do anything to help that relationship. Or it's like making a garden in the spring. You go out and hoe it one time, say, well, I hoed it once, that's enough. Weeds aren't going to grow back in there. I done did it one time. Well, of course, that doesn't make any sense, does it? So what do? You have to make that decision daily. We have to wake up every morning and say, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to serve Him today. And if we keep that in our minds, that will direct our path when we're walking by faith, to keep us from walking carnally, walking in the flesh. That's how you kill the strength and the power that the flesh has over us. Notice this, and to show you what kind of problem this is, Paul actually dealt with this, and he dealt with this by asking questions. And I think these things will help us too. Notice what he said in 1 Corinthians 6 and 12. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Now what is he saying? Is it helpful? What I'm doing, what I'm going to decide to do, or what I'm going to decide to say, or where I'm going to decide to go, is it helpful? Now, what do we mean by that? There are many things that are within themselves aren't sin. And here's where I think a lot of people struggle, is we look at it in terms of just sin. And if we look at it in terms of just sin, we tend to categorize that. Well, it's not one of the biggies. It's not up there with stealing and adultery, and we'll put it up there in the high range. When we start categorizing it, then we're just, as long as I don't sin too much. Well, Paul says, here's how you have to look at it, is it helpful? Is what I'm doing, is it going to be helpful to me, emotionally, physically, spiritually? Is the things that I say going to be good for those that are around me? Is it going to help them what I say, or is it going to hurt them what I say? Now, what I say may not be a sin. What I'm doing may not be a sin. Where I'm going may not be a sin, but is it helpful? And here's what I mean by this. A lot of times we will say, well, I said this, and I know it hurt their feelings, or I know it did this or that, but what I said was the truth. Well, it may be the truth, but what you said to them, was it helpful to them? And it may be, you may have to be confronting someone with sin, but there's a helpful way in which to say it, isn't there? I could say something in a truthful way and still do a lot of damage. So is it helpful? So when we think about a lot of different things, we can think about, as Paul said, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. Well, it may be okay for me to do this. It may be neutral morally. But is it helpful? Or am I actually hurting in doing it? Is it drawing me closer to God or farther away from God? Is it helping somebody, or is it pushing them farther away? What I can do may not be. It's kind of like my wife tells me sometimes. She'll say, you did this, but you're still able to say, well, you can't prove I did it by this motive. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And I start thinking about it. Yeah, I may have got a shot in there with somebody, but they can't really prove that's what I was doing. Or I may have said it in just this way to where if they caught on to it and confront it, they can't actually prove that's the way I said it, And I think sometimes that's how we do things, is we do things in a way that, well, I'm right here on the border. I didn't really say anything wrong, or I didn't really do anything wrong, but I think it accomplished what I was wanting to accomplish, and that may not have been a helpful thing. So a lot of times we get caught up in a play on words, if you will, of is it a sin or is it not a sin when we're trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. I learned this lesson a lot with a teenage class. We went through several lessons on is something a sin. I had them, ask me, and we'll study it. If we can't find the answer, we'll find somebody who can. And a lot of things that they ask, I'm like, I don't know. And the more you really get in and study it, well, okay, it really comes down to not necessarily is it a sin or not a sin. It comes down to, is it helpful or is it not helpful? What's my reason for doing it? What's my motive for doing it? What's the end result going to be? What am I trying to accomplish out of this? So if I'm determined, if I'm committed enough to say I'm going to walk by faith, and I'm going to do it with this vigor of, I'm not just going to say I don't want to sin a lot. I need to go into it with the attitude, I'm not going to sin at all. Even though I know the Bible says we all sin and fall short of the glory of God, I still try not to. My goal is to not sin, not just to sin a little bit. So when I start looking at terms like that, I have to actually break it down farther and ask myself, is it helpful what I'm doing? Is it drawing me closer? Is it something that's going to be good for me? Is it going to be beneficial to me? Or do I need to steer clear of it? There's some people that it may not be wrong, it may not be a sin for me to talk to and hang around with and be around. But is it good for me to? You know, is it going to lead to something good? Or are they going to draw me farther away from God? Because their intention is not to follow God. They're not necessarily trying to corrupt me, but how much association do I need to have before it does start affecting me? Now, we can't put ourselves in a bubble, of course, and we've got to live in this world, but we do have to think in terms of, is this a benefit for me? I don't know about you. There's friends that I have that's no longer friends just for that very reason. It wasn't beneficial for me to still be friends with them. It wasn't leading me to where I wanted to go, where I needed to go. So sometimes you just have to ask yourself those things. So that's what Paul was saying. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. But notice what else he says here. He goes in, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. Then he says, all things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. So what does he mean by that? Does it bring me under its power? This is another important question, I think, in an effort to pursue this walking by faith and put the power and the strength that sin has over me in the flesh to kill it. I have to ask the question okay, it may be lawful for me. Again, it may be morally neutral, but can I be brought under the power of it? Here's where, and I'm not going to take the class in this direction, but there's a lot of things when it comes to things. People say, well, how much is sin, or what part of it is sin? Is it truly a sin or not? And you're debating about your body's a temple and a lot of different other things. But how we really need to look at it is it bringing me under its power? There's a lot of things that may be fine, but I can be brought under the power of it. I never thought it would be happen when for me it was Mountain Dew. It was a good example for that. First kidney stone I had, that's the first question the doctor asked me. He told me, he said, you drink a lot of Mountain Dew, don't you? I said, I don't know, whatever you define a lot, Usually in this hand I always had one. So I guess that was a lot, And after that first kidney stone and that trip to the hospital, and there's some screaming and crying and things that went on in the back seat while my wife stopped at every single red light. I don't know why, but she did. It was a lot of pain, so I decided then, I don't like this pain, so I'm going to quit Mountain Dew. And I didn't realize that Mountain Dew was that hard to quit. I didn't realize that I was under the power of Mountain Dew. I mean, that was an experience, decide not to drink that anymore. I don't know if it was for the caffeine or the sugar. I kind of like both of them. So, and it had a lot of it. But and you can put in whatever it is. But there's a lot of things that we may be brought under the power of that we don't realize that we are. If we're addicted to something else besides God, then we've got a problem, right? That's what being brought under the power of. So, you can fill in the blanks with whatever it is, but sometimes, as Paul says here, something may be lawful for me to do. Well, is it wrong to drink a Mountain Dew? Well, no. But it can become a problem, and it caused a problem both physically and then emotionally when I got off of them. But it caused some issues. So we can be brought under the power of something before we realize it. It can become our idol, if you will. That can be money. That can be, you can put whatever you want to in front of it there. But as Paul says, I can't be brought under the power of these things. So I have to make sure, where does my power come from? Where does my strength come from? What am I able to overcome? Am I the one in control here, or is something else in control of me? And that's what Satan does. He wants us to think he's not in control of us. And then he also wants us to think we don't have the power to stop him from doing that, when we absolutely do. But we give him the power. We give him that power over us of whatever it may be. Then that's when something can lead to sin.
Well, you said earlier that your Mountain Dew wasn't a sin, but one thing that addiction did was lower your self-control. I can look back at 2 years ago when I lost 60 pounds. I had crazy willpower after being a couple months into that. I could go do whatever you wanted me to do. I felt like I had the willpower to do whatever. I mean, I was teaching Bible class, I was doing that. I had several things going on that I had the willpower to do it. Now that I'm not focusing on that, I have no more willpower anymore.
Yeah.
So low.
Yeah, and to kind of clarify, yeah, one Mountain Dew may not be bad, but 60 a day could be, is, I guess. And that's what it becomes before we realize it. Something controls us that we don't realize that control. I couldn't imagine now, I look at, gas stations when you go in and get a drink, all these energy drinks that they have now, it's probably 20 times more than what a Mountain Dew was then. My heart would explode. I don't see how people drink things like that. You may, I couldn't handle that. I drink just a little sip of caffeine. I'm up 4 days. I just couldn't imagine that. But things can get into, and like I say, I'm not going to go into, okay, this particular thing, this particular thing, this particular thing. It's anything that controls us. Becomes an issue.
I meant that if you can't control your diet, what else can you control in your life?
Right.
Don't get me wrong, diet's a hard thing to control, but there's something there that gain willpower, gain that willpower in other aspects of our life once we get that down.
Yeah. Willpower is a hard thing on a lot of things. You put certain things in front of me, and then broccoli or something in front of me, I'm going to make certain choices with that, right? It's just this what it is, I've just resolved at my age, if I'm going to be in shape, I kind of like the shape I've got. I'm just going to keep it that. I've got a lot of money invested in it, so I want to be a good steward of what I've accumulated. So I don't want to be wasteful, so I'm going to keep it, I guess. What's that? It is. That's the way to look at it, right? I don't want to get shot too much, just a little. That's But I mean, all of us have something. I mean, all of us have something that it could be anything. But Paul says here, I'm not going to be brought under the power of any. And of course we don't have a lot of the questions Paul was getting asked, but he's answering. It sounds like they're saying, okay, can I do this but not do this? Can I do this but not do this? What about this? And I think that's what people try to do, isn't it? Well, I can do this, just don't do this part of it. Or I can do this, but just not this part. And Paul's saying, listen, there's a lot of things that are lawful. There's a lot of things that are morally neutral. But one is it helpful? And two is, are you being brought under the power of it? He said there's a different way to look at this. Don't just categorize it as sin, because we tend to say big sin, little sin, middle sin, some sin, a lot of sin, all this. Sin is, Paul says, look at it differently. How is it helping you on your walk of faith? Is it distracting you from it? Is it overpowering you where it's harder to walk it? There's a lot of things that we make our walk more difficult than it needs to be. And I think that's what Paul is saying here. Make it as easy as you possibly can, and how you do that is be committed to say, I'm going to run at it as a full bore. The very best that I can do, as hard as I can do it, so I'm not distracted. And some people get more distracted than others by different things. We all get distracted by different things. Try to stay focused so we don't sink in the process. Then notice he goes on. Look in 1 Corinthians 8 and 13. He says, therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. So I ask myself, is it helpful? I ask myself, am I being brought under the power of it? And then I need to ask, does it hurt other people? May be fine for me, may not be nothing wrong with it within itself, but if it's a stumbling block to someone else, then is that the right thing to do? Is that the right thing to say? You know, we may say, well, that's just how I talk. You know, my second language is sarcasm. I can speak 2 languages. You ever know that? I've got English and sarcasm, and usually sarcasm is my first one, and English is my second one. Well, that's not for everybody. That could be hurtful. That could be harmful. So we have to make sure that we're asking ourselves, is what I'm doing, is it hurting someone else? You know, we're always worried about and blaming someone else for being a stumbling block to us. Am I the stumbling block? Am I the one, am I willing to give this up if it helps this person stay on the straight and narrow? If it helps this person in their walk of faith? You know, there's things that I firmly believe, and I believe the Bible tells that. There's things that we go through. There's suffering that we may go through. There's trials that we may go through so someone else can see us go through it and maybe be easier in their walk of faith how they see us handle it. So there's things that may not even be about me. It may be about somebody else. So in this walk of faith, am I looking at that other person? Do I consider these things before I speak? Will the words that we say be considered offensive or hurtful to those who are listening? Are the words that we're speaking hurtful about someone else who isn't present? Can we hide behind the mantle again? Am I just speaking the truth? That goes back to, well, what I said is truthful. What I said wasn't a sin. But again, is it hurting that person? You know, there's a way in which we can say it. You know, a soft word turns around a lot of things. So we've got to make sure that we're thinking not only of ourselves in this, is it hurting me, but is it hurting someone else? We have to look farther than ourselves. Look at 1 Corinthians 10 and 31. He says, therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. This is another simple one. Is what I'm doing, does it bring glory and honor to God? The things that I'm saying, does it do that? The places that I'm going, this doesn't mean I have to be sitting on a pew 24 hours a day. I can bring glory to God how I do my job during the week. I can bring glory to God of how I talk to someone at the gas pumps or at the cash register. You know, I can bring glory and honor to God, so I have to ask myself, is that what it's doing? Am I glorifying God right now in this moment of what I'm doing, where I'm at, or what I'm saying? And that should be true for all of us, shouldn't it? If we're walking by faith, people see God through us. They see the gospel through us, how we're living it. They see Jesus in us. That, you know, we're growing smaller. He's growing bigger. We put on Him. It's no longer us. We're dying to ourselves. We're killing those fleshly things. We've got to kill it so we can walk by faith. That brings Him glory. That brings Him honor. But again, we have to ask ourselves, is that what we're doing? So how do I do this? Well, in Luke 14 and verse 33, Jesus said this, so likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. I think this is a serious commitment to walking by faith that the Lord's calling us to do. He said that we must sacrifice everything to be His disciple. So what we're actually sacrificing is our will. It's no longer our will. It's no longer what I want to do. It's no longer what I want to say. It's no longer where I want to go. My Christian walk, I follow it where it leads. I don't need to expect it to follow me where I'm going. I follow it. And it's a straight path. It's a hard path. It's a narrow path. It's a difficult path. But it leads to life everlasting. That's what we're striving for, isn't it? That's what walking by faith means. Is I'm walking by faith. I'm walking to something. I'm going somewhere. Where am I going? I've got to choose myself. This is where I want to end up. And to do that, I've got to have a plan. I just can't haphazardly just walk through this life. We just can't do it. Because what will happen is we'll be tossed to and fro, as James says, all over, because we're double-minded. Because what happens is we're going to be brought under the power of something when we do that. And we don't want to be brought under the power of anything other than God's will. That's the very first thing. I've got to do His will. I've got to follow His word. And I think that's what walking by faith is all about. In Proverbs 27:20, it says, hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. If I'm trying to do my will, I'm never going to be happy. I'm never going to be satisfied. Because there's always going to be something better out there, I think. If I could just have this, if I could just do this, then that will make me a better Christian. Will it? That will make me happy. Will it? What will? Following God. Nothing else will. Make it our aim not to sin. Not just to don't do the big ones. Don't have the aim of, well, I don't want to sin that much. The Bible says I'm going to sin, so I'm going to try not to sin that much. No, try not to sin at all. And the very best effort that we do, sin is still going to be there because we all fall short. So I've got to do the best that I can do. And think about it. Doesn't God deserve our best? Hadn't He always required our best? And I think that's what we need to give Him. Any final thoughts or comments? I don't know if I stopped enough to let anybody talk.
This may sound a little harsh, but earlier you said that the Christian life doesn't follow us, we follow it. And I've been thinking about that the last couple of weeks. Something I've started thinking is the Christian life probably doesn't lead us to the couch 24/7. I've been struggling with laziness the last couple of months. It's like, man, this ain't where I'm supposed to be. I deliver food, helping people, doing whatever I can. I promise it's not the couch.
Yeah, it's hard. And I tell you, a lot of people, even including myself, I've talked to people you don't keep going back to COVID, but since COVID, that's changed a lot of people to where it seems just harder to get out. We've got used to certain things. We got enclosed. We got, and it's hard to get back out there like you should. To have those same ambitions, to have the same enthusiasm. But we have to. You have to, and the more that we make ourselves, the easier it will be to do. You just have to tell yourself, am I going to do this, which within itself may not be wrong, but it's not helpful to me. But this over here, if I choose to do this could be helpful to me, both emotionally, physically, spiritually. This could help me more. So why don't I make this choice? Why don't I make the wiser choice? Not necessarily just the easy, the comfortable choice. And I think as Christians, I think you're absolutely right. We have to start thinking more like that and force ourselves to be more like that. I think there's a lot of things that God commands us to do and has us to do that seems repetitious to us. But I think it's for the purpose of keeping it at the forefront of our minds so we don't get lazy, so we don't get complacent. We need to make sure we're boldly, not just dragging our feet and crawling by faith. We need to walk by faith. Stand up straight, stand up tall, be bold and walk by faith. But that's going to take a commitment on our part and an effort on our part, and more importantly, a plan on our part. We need to make sure that we have it. Anybody else?
Maybe we could try going door knocking instead of giving out watchtowers, we can give out those house calls.
You say that again. I'm sorry, Parker. I didn't.
Maybe we could all go door knocking instead of giving out watchtowers, we can give out those house calls.
Watchtower. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can do. And, just like we seen in there as we go through our annual report every year, not everything's for everybody. Everybody's got their own talents. Everybody's got their own abilities in which this is what I can do to help. This is what we can't do everything, but each of us can do something and find out what our talent is and do it to the very best of our ability.